Let's just get into her. Look at her. Gigi Goode, local gal made good.
I love Gigi Goode. I will start off by saying that. I met Gigi Goode actually when she did my show Green Eggs and Glam at the Lyric Hyperion a few years ago. And I think she had just moved to LA and she was new and I was like, who is this girl? I could just tell she was something special. I thought she was amazing just from the get-go when I met her. And I'm gagged that she did this show that I put on a while back, and then I was like, oh, now she's on Drag Race.
Right.
So,
and served it so hard on Drag Race.
I love Gigi. I think she's amazing.
What was that number that she did on your show, her early LA number? What was that show like?
I don't remember the number. I was hosting and kind of behind the scenes.
We know how that goes,
You know,
yes.
you're behind the curtain. You don't really hear or see what's going on. Well, you hear what's going on, but you don't see what's going on.
Right, Lady
But I
Red,
heard
classic,
the cheer.
loved to sit backstage and not even go on stage when she was hosting.
Yes, but I do remember Gigi was amazing. I thought she was really super cool, and I didn't really know who she was, and then fast forward a couple of years, and here she is, this huge star, and I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and it was barely even a couple of years.
Yeah.
When she moved here at 20, and we just had her on the show at 22. All right, I'm old. Let's continue. Look at her. Loris. Drag Race favorite.
I love Loris. I love Loris. I've worked with Loris many, many times.
So many times.
She was at my Green Eggs and Glam show, and then we had her often at Wigs and Waffles.
Yes.
I've known Loris just from the community and just from out and about, but I've always been a big fan as well. I think she's really fun. I think that her makeup is amazing, and I loved watching her on Dragula Resurrection recently. I thought she was fantastic.
Yes.
She had her come back, and she's that bitch.
Now, what about Drag Race and Dragula for you? Was that ever a thought? Did you ever audition?
Totally. You know, I actually, full T, I auditioned for both. You know, I think as a drag performer, as somebody that wants to put themselves out there, first of all, I think that, you know, I would dare you to find a drag performer that doesn't want some attention. You know, I think there's just like this underlying, you know, drag performers like attention. And I think when it comes down to Dragula versus Drag Race, you know, a lot of differences, but a lot of similarities as well. You know, I think you're an artist wanting to put yourself out there, wanting recognition and wanting to entertain and engage with people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that it's different just in terms of presentation. I think one of the things that I love about Dragula is it's, you know, everybody is included. You can be a drag queen, you can be a drag king, you can be a trans person. You know, there's no limits or boundaries. There's no box that you have to fill to be a Dragula performer, and that's what I think I love most about Dragula. And I love the Boulet brothers. I think they're fantastic. I've worked with them many times.
Yeah, you have.
For Queen Kong, and I actually won a Dragula pageant back when they were doing their pageant nights back at clubs before they did the show. And that was one of my favorite drag experiences. That was the one and only time I've ever crowd surfed.
Amazing.
Which was super fun. But yeah, I think that both the people that are involved with Dragula and Drag Race, I think different presentations of drag, but I think both equally important and worthy. In many ways, I think Dragula contestants are more worthy because I feel like it's a little bit more of do your own thing versus Drag Race is a little bit, you kind of have to fit into a box in many ways.
Now, Loris is a makeup genius, but you're her behind-the-scenes sister. What's a story from backstage?
I have a very particular story. Loris is a great makeup artist, and every time I see her, she's always beat to the gods. And I remember one time backstage at Wigs and Waffles, we were up in our dressing room, and I remember Laura saying to me, "Oh my God," she was like, "Your top lip looks great." And she kept going on about how great my top lip looked, and then she kind of like, then she was like, "But the bottom lip." I was like, okay. But she kept going on and on how great the top lip looked, but it was like definitely in shade to the bottom lip.
Shade. All right. I love your top lip. Look up. Bitch Puddin'. Now, another Dragula girl, you've worked with her. She's done, sort of made a revolution in digital drag, really. Like a lot of imitators, but she was the first one to kind of get that Twitch thing up and running.
She is. I'm, first of all, so proud of Bitch Pudding. I'm so proud of her and so amazed at all of the wonderful, cool, new things that she has done with drag and introduced so many people to. You know, Bitch is part of the Dragula world. And when I remember when I met Bitch Pudding, it was actually at DragCon a couple of years ago. And I remember it was kind of like after DragCon, we were outside, she was visiting from Georgia, and we just happened to introduce ourselves to each other. And I just happened to have a joint, and we just happened to smoke it,
Right.
and we just hit it off.
Yeah.
We just hit it off, and it was just cool to it was cool to kiki with somebody and get to know somebody before they get into, you know, to that level of drag, because, you know, I feel like when you meet somebody before they get big, you get a real idea of who they are. You know, I didn't feel like she was putting anything on for me, and I just felt like she was such a cool person inherently. So, so I love Bitch. I think she's really cool. I've worked with her a few times, seen her do a lot of performances. I've worked with her at Exposure. Actually, it's funny, she was at Exposure right before she was on Dragula, and then she also did my show, Green Eggs and Glam, after she had filmed Dragula, but before it had come out. And I remember talking to her, and she was so excited because it was about to come out. And I was trying to like dig a little bit, like, oh, how is it? What was it like? Without digging too much, because, you know, there's, you know, NDAs.
NDA.
So, but she was like, I remember her in retrospect just being like, oh, just wait till you see it. This is going to be life-changing. And then she won. And I think that's so freaking cool. I think she's so awesome.
Love it. Okay, look at her. Vander Von Odd. You've worked with all the winners of Dragula.
Yes. Oh, well, I think at this point it should be obvious that I love Vander.
Yes.
Vander's another person that I worked with early on. Actually, very, very, very early on. I was sort of at the beginning of my Exposure career. And it was when one of the first times that I worked with Vander was at Exposure, but I was also doing my first show at the time. And Vander was willing to be in the show. And just watching Vander versus a lot of the other performers, you know, I hate to compare performers because everyone has their merits and everybody that put themselves out there is worthy and valid, but there's always gonna be some people that stand out. And Vander was definitely one of those people that stood out to me, not only as a performer, but just as a person, and their kindness really struck me. And so after Vander performed, and then when I found out Vander was gonna be on Dragula, I was not at all surprised when Vander won.
Now, you've mentioned a couple times Exposure Drag, which I've been to several times, and it really serves an important purpose, I think, in the Queen's ecosystem of performing, because Exposure Drag was a show which was, you were doing it for exposure, right?
Exactly.
Occasionally they would pay someone like a guest star, but mostly it was girls would come. And tell me how that went down, what that scene was
Totally,
like.
you know, and I think that really shaped my experience of show world. When I first started doing drag, my very first performance solo was at Akbar with Tony Soto. It was a show called Learn the Words, Bitch. But literally the next day I was at Exposure, and when I started that was sort of my entrance. It was my first permanent gig. It was my first, you know, ongoing gig. And I was so grateful for the experience, because when you're starting drag and you don't know anybody and you don't know how to do your makeup, you don't know how to dress yourself, you don't know anything, you are just praying that somebody will take you in and allow you to get up on stage and do something. And exposure was that place for me, and I will forever be grateful for exposure because I would not have been able to hone my craft. I would not have been able to put myself out there to develop the confidence that is needed to, to be a performer without exposure. And, I'm just so grateful for the experience. I think that, they don't really judge you based off of how long you've been doing it. They don't judge you off of how you look. They judge you off of what you put into it. And I think that is really something to be considered when it comes to drag, is the effort that you're putting into it. You might not be perfect, you might not be polished, but if you're trying and putting yourself out there, that's gotta be worth something.